Just another Sunday. Routine, but there's no expectation in our hearts that we would meet with God. Maybe you're busy, you're stressful. Why do we come to church? I know today is a little bit different when we embrace one big church and we embrace family and children and the young ones, which is good for us to do. But why do we come? In the book of Revelation, we get a glimpse of the splendor of Jesus, his majesty and his power. And you might, as a person, be going through a hard time. Maybe pain has caused confusion in your heart. Maybe disappointment. I think of those that we visit pastorally and they're going through hard times. And sometimes we look through it glass darkly because we don't have all the answers. This side of heaven, we don't have all the answers. And we can only be there for them. We can only pray for them in faith, amen. And there are people who are going through a lot of pain and suffering. But this morning, I pray that our eyes would be fixed on Jesus, for who he is and what he has done. It was in the midst of persecution, a season of confusion, that John was on the island of Patmos. And we read in verse 10 of the first chapter in Revelation that John was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. That was a good position to be in to hear from God, to be in the Spirit. It's good that we be in the Spirit. He was in the Spirit in a place like Patmos. It was not a condition of an environment that brought peace and joy because he was exiled. He was the last of the apostles. All his friends, his peers, had been martyred. Now John was left. You probably wondered why, what's going on. There must have been confusion in his heart to understand that those whom he loved and served and fellowshiped with, they themselves had been martyred. Peter, he was crucified upside down. But here this old man was left alone in exile in Patmos. This I come to understand when we look at John and what he experienced on that day, the Lord's Day, being in the Spirit, is this: it's not the condition of the environment around us that determines if we are in the Spirit. It is the condition of our heart. It's the condition of our heart. We can have all the right music and sing all the right songs, but if your heart is not in the right place with God, you're not going to feel a thing. It's like the person who came out of church and said, well, I didn't get much out of that. And I thought, well, since when was worship all about you? If you didn't get anything out of it, it's because you didn't put anything into it. See, it's not the condition of the environment, it's the condition of your heart. How do you think John got in the Spirit on the Lord's Day? I don't think it just happened as a result of him dwelling on how bad the circumstances were. I think John may have been dwelling on the goodness and the promises of God, as we have this morning been singing that song of God's faithfulness, amen. I think John may have found a way to get into a position of being joyful in God, regardless of the misery that he was going through. I love in verse 12 of chapter 1, we read that after John being in the Spirit, he heard a loud voice as of a trumpet. You can imagine the sound of that loud voice. And here's what it said: I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. And what you see right in a book. Here he heard this voice behind him. And then in verse 12 we read, Then I turned to see the voice that spoke to me. Then I turned to see the voice that spoke with me. When God speaks to you, let me ask you a challenging question. Do you turn and see, or do you just go on doing your own thing? John actually had to do something. He turned around. The voice was not in front of him. The voice was behind him. And he had to turn. This was not just another Sunday. This was a Sunday that John would always remember. Here was an old man living in a prison, in a barren land, exiled for preaching about Jesus. Eating poorly, performing hard labor, aware that his friends were gone. But in the midst of his suffering and pain, Jesus appeared to him. Isn't it interesting that when Jesus appeared to him, Jesus did not bring John a mattress. He didn't spread a table of good food before him. He did not miraculously lift John off the island of Patmos. He could have done all that, but he didn't. He did something far better. In the Spirit, he revealed Jesus. I can hear John saying, "My life is miserable, but I ask not for sympathy, not for help, just give me Jesus." That's what happened. And so, friend, regardless of what you go through, or how life, or this journey of faith, I pray we'll always see Jesus. Amen. I pray when we come around this table in a few minutes, as we eat and drink, we will see the Lord. Amen. Just very quickly, because you could spend all the day on this wonderful chapter. John, he got a vision of Jesus, of him who was walking amongst the lampstands. The lampstands speak of the church. Jesus is in charge. Amen. Jesus is reigning. Regardless of what you see on the outside, he's Lord of his church. Amen. He gets a vision of Jesus. Jesus was clothed with a garment down to his feet. And the garment here described was not the garment of a priest, but the garment of a king. Jesus is not only our priest, he is our king. Amen. He is the one who reigns even over death. His head and his hair were like wool, as white as snow. John's vision of Jesus reveals the eternal glory and purity of Jesus. Jesus is perfect. He is righteous. There is no one like him. He is the altogether lovely one. Amen. His eyes were like a flame of fire. There is nothing hid from his sight. He sees all things. That is our Jesus. His feet like brass. Brass speaks of strength. Our God is almighty. He is all powerful. Nothing is impossible with God. In verse 15, he is described, and his voice as the voice of many waters. He speaks with power and authority. That's our Jesus. You may not be on the island of Patmos, but you're on a journey of faith. Some days you have good days. Sometimes you can be rubbish, or it appears to be rubbish. I want to assure you that Jesus is always with you. He's walking among the lampstands. Amen.